Hey adventurers, today we're doing a video on Resurrection Trope. If we haven't done a specific video about this before, it's definitely come up consistently throughout the years we've had this channel, but we wanted to look at it from a different light. T and I were discussing it today, and we were thinking, why do books or movies or stories resurrect a character? What is the purpose? And I think that defining that purpose plays a significant role on whether or not the resurrection is done well. So we have a list of some books, movies, stories. A lot of them are movies, but some of them movies, books, etc. That we're going to look at and talk about the resurrection trope.
Yep.
You want me to jump in with the Crow?
You jump in first because you have the first one that's written down.
So the first movie that came to mind was The Crow. This is one that I had a lot of mixed feelings about. It has a lot of language and explicit content, and I started it and I didn't finish it, and then I ended up picking up where I left off several months later and finishing it because I'd heard really great things about the story and I was curious as to what the reasoning was. I'm going to go ahead and give a little summary for The Crow, so if you don't want spoilers for that, you can go ahead and skip. Can we put a timestamp for that?
Yeah.
So this is a story about a man and his wife who are a husband and wife who were murdered and killed by some very bad people. That's a very mild summary of what happened. Anyhow, so the guy, his name is Eric. He comes back to life for one day to create or cause or bring about retribution for the actions that were done. But while he was personally motivated to bring about retribution, he wasn't doing it just for personal gain. So this is in comparison to the Count of Monte Cristo, which doesn't have a resurrection trope but is very focused on revenge.
Yep.
And the reason for revenge was for personal gain, for personal justification, and what Eric's doing in The Crow is he was seeking revenge against people who had done worse things than the people who had wronged the Count of Monte Cristo. So they had betrayed him, they had lied about him, people were like murdering in this world. It was a very different situation. So in comparison, Eric's revenge seems more justified, but also his acts for justice weren't done for selfish personal satisfaction. That played a role in his motivation, but that wasn't his only reasoning. His overall goal was for the greater good. So, I mean, his wife or his fiance was already dead. Like, there's nothing he can change about that. What could causing retribution do unless it was changing it for the greater good? So he was resurrected to change something for the greater good. He was a good influence on his return, and the story ended with Eric going back to the grave where he belonged because he's dead. So he created a lot of good in the time that he was resurrected. So what was his reason for being resurrected? To bring about good and like for much longer. So there was a specific purpose in that. That's what the whole story was focused on. There was a little bit of, I guess you could call it magic if you wanted to, depending on how you're looking at it, of how he had the life and what that was tied to with the crow, etc., etc. I'm not going to go into that because this isn't a movie review, but this is the story that really made me start thinking about this resurrection trope and what got us talking about it today.
So the next one that we brought up is specifically Gandalf in Lord of the Rings. Again, spoilers, if you haven't read Lord of the Rings, what are you doing? Go read it. But Fellowship of the Ring, Gandalf dies fighting the Balrog, or he falls with the Balrog and it is presumed dead. Later on we find out that he fights the Balrog and ends up dying at that point. But we don't learn that till later after he's returned. And his return plays a specific role in this story, and that role is that of, let me phrase it this way. So Gandalf was sent to Middle-earth to fight the rising darkness of Sauron. And him as well as the other Istari, the other four wizards, all came with this same purpose, to fight the darkness of Sauron. And Gandalf, Mithrandir, was the only one who followed and stayed true to that calling, that what he was sent there to do. He was the only one that stayed true to that. Radagast fell off and became a lover of the woods and nature and birds, and kind of that's what he became the protector of. Saruman started taking power to himself and trying to accumulate power for himself so he could become the next Dark Lord, essentially, is what he wanted. Not really wanted to be a Dark Lord, but he wanted the power. Gandalf didn't. Gandalf was there to fight against this. And so when he died fighting against that darkness. And he was sent back because he had been faithful in his task so far. And he had also...
There was more work
for him still to be done. The darkness of Sauron had not yet been defeated. And so he needed to go back and help continue with that fight until such time as the fight could no longer be won, or else they had won. One of those two, whatever happened, that's what he needed to be there until. And so he was sent back. But his resurrection was specifically designed and given back. So the way that his spirit works as an Istari, as a Maya, a lesser angel basically, can't die in the same way as elf or a human, specifically a human actually, because elves also have immortal spirits that go a whole bunch of lore that is unnecessary to go into. But basically Gandalf as a Maya is a immortal being, and so his spirit cannot die unless Eru kills it, Eru being God. And so Eru receives the spirit back, as well as why am I blanking on all the words? Anyways, the greater angels receive his spirit back, and with the council of Eru and the decision of Eru and everything, they send it back in order to complete his mission.
Which, when he's completed his mission, there's actually a line in the book where he says, my purpose here on Earth is done, and he goes on to the Grey Havens, right?
Yes.
So he has an end goal, and he dies, if you will, after that.
He leaves and goes back to where he
belongs. That's the end of his story.
Yes.
Yeah. So now we've talked about two great, well done resurrections and stories, and we're going to talk about two that we particularly disliked. So this one and this one. So let's start with here.
Yep.
What is that? It's not Era 3.
It's Phase 3. Phase 3.
Marvel Phase 3.
Specifically Infinity War and Endgame.
Yeah.
Spoilers of everything up and who knows.
This is all spoilers.
Spoil it all.
Yeah.
So
there's the blip. The blip happens, and then they go and undo the blip, and there's consequences for undoing the blip. But why did they choose to bring back everyone? What was the purpose? Why? And the answer we came up with is the fans wanted it, and the characters missed them.
Yeah.
Like when we lose people in our lives, when we as human people lose people, we miss. I should hope. In most situations, we're missing them, we grieve their loss. That's normal, and that's something that should be focused on, as opposed to just disregarding that and bringing them back. Just get rid of that grief because, ta-da, they're alive again.
And actually, I didn't think about this until just now, but there is a juxtaposition even within the characters in that story, whereas you look at Captain America, he's moved on. He's understanding. I've lost people. This is what it is. It sucks. It hurts. I'm grieving for them, but I've moved on, and I will move on, and I will be okay. Whereas you look at Iron Man, and Iron Man is the one with the, how can we do this? How can we bring him back? We've got to be able to. There's got to be a way. And
I mean, it's all very focused around their personalities and their characters and their motivations, and probably they feel for allowing that to happen in the first place or not being able to stop it. But the fact is that there was no reason to bring those people back. Yes, the fans wanted it. They didn't want to see Spider-Man die, okay? But
Black Panther, all this whole list of characters that we've grown to love.
That if you make that decision, then you need to stick with it, unless it's for a specific reason.
And we don't really see a reason other than money. Because
right.
Marvel sees, if we kill all these characters, then we don't have anywhere to go with the future. The future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is basically dead if you kill half the future of the cast, I mean, what you end up with at the end of Infinity War is the main 7 original Avengers, and that's all that's left. And so we are now back at the starting point, and we've lost all the forward momentum that we've gained.
Exactly.
Which, I understand it, and I understand obviously this is the way they have to go forward with this story that they're telling. But also it's kind of frustrating because there doesn't seem to be a real good motivation to bring these characters back with no consequences. And that's the issue is that we will find and discuss with this one and the next one, is that there's no consequences, there's no reaction from the people who have died and the people who lived and are now seeing their people come back to them. We're not seeing those reactions and the consequences of that.
Honestly, the choice of the blip in phase 3 or right before phase 3 sounds like, oh, what if we do this? And the writers were like, oh, what if we kill half the people? And everyone's like, oh my goodness, the response will be amazing, we'll get so much money, we have to do it. And then they're like, well, how do we undo that? Because it was like, we can't actually continue without it. It just seemed like a poor choice. And like there's far worse films than Marvel films. And their stories, they do make a good effort and they try, and we're not trying to rat on any Marvel fans out there.
No.
We're just pointing out that there's no great reason for this resurrection, if you will.
But I will also say that with that there's not really a reason for it. There is in-world explanations for it that make sense with the lore and magic and science and everything that has been built up within the universe of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
They did the best they could to redeem the situation.
Yes.
Talking a lot about redemption and resurrection.
Yes.
Revenge.
So the other movie that we were talking about specifically with this sort of poor variation of the Resurrection Trope is Wonder Woman 1984.
Guys, do we even need to explain this one?
It's been talked about over and over again, and that is the return of Steve... Oh, what's his name? Steve...
her boyfriend, Wonder Woman's boyfriend.
The pilot.
First
I can't think of his name. I should know it off the top of my head, but it's not there. And so anyways, in Wonder Woman 1984, she wishes upon the wishing stone. Again, the magic is there, the in-world reasoning is there for this type of thing to happen. But the way they do it is they bring him back in the body of another man. And that's the issue. Because, guys, can you imagine? Like, we don't even need to explain the problems about this. And what's the purpose? We had all resigned ourselves. Well, first of all, there's plenty of explanations why Steve didn't have to die in the first one, so I think that's a big problem with a lot of fans. Yeah, that's true.
But we can also acknowledge, okay, he did sacrifice himself. He made a choice that was very heroic of him, and we can resign ourselves to his being dead. Wonder Woman should have resigned herself to him being dead, and we didn't. It's just like all. You wonder why people don't know how to grieve these days.
But then, so what was I about to say? So his return, you could literally do it and just bring him back, and it wouldn't be the same issue. Just bring him back. You look at all the other ways the wishes were manifested in the world, and it's things like walls just shooting up to surround things. Out of nothing. Why couldn't they do the same thing with Steve, rather than sticking him in through the body of another person, which they specifically say that it is still the same body. The body didn't physically change. They just see Steve in that person now. And that's what it is, and that's the issue. It's not even that there is a resurrection or that there's not an explanation, in-world explanation for it. It's simply that they did it bad.
They did it badly, and Wonder Woman's reactions to it were badly, because she could have used having Steve as a moment to heal, and I think they tried to portray it as that, and by giving him up at the end or whatever, but it didn't work. Like, it still come across as a whiny character, overpowered character who wants more than anyone should be able to have. So, did they do it well? Why did they choose to resurrect Steve? What was the reasoning for that?
And there's not really one. There's not really a good reason.
It's just, people don't get what they want. If you lose someone, they're dead.
We will continue on because we don't want this video to go too long. And quickly, I'll briefly touch on the Superman resurrection in the Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, and Justice League trilogy. I will specifically use the Zack Snyder's Justice League because it makes more sense than the theatrical release one, but the theory kind of applies to both of them. And this one I took a long time explaining it all to Kate, and I'm not going to do it again here. But basically, the character arc of Superman in movie 1 is learning to be both a hero and a man on Earth, and that he can be both together. The storyline of Batman v Superman is Batman looking at Superman and seeing a dangerous being, and no one person should have that power, while at the same time Superman is learning, yes, I'm allowed to have this power, but I also need to be held responsible, but people can't expect me to be everywhere at once because I can't be. I'm still only one person. And so there's those two juxtaposing storylines of Batman, no one should have this much power, and Superman, if you have this power, you need to be responsible for it. And that's what they're trying to do. And then at the end, of course, Superman dies at the end of Batman v Superman and is resurrected in Justice League. And this is where the issue, it's not really an issue because of how it's done in the movie, with the reaction and the reaction of the characters and their reasoning why. Specifically Batman and Wonder Woman, they are the driving force behind, okay, let's resurrect Superman. We need this powerful being that is that one person who is as powerful as we need them to be. Batman sees this, he's like, he was perfect, he was the guy that we knew couldn't exist in Batman v Superman, but we hoped he would, but since power corrupts, he can't be. And then Batman's opinion changes, and this is really confusing, but
wrap it up, Brady.
But so he has changed his mind and say, okay, if we can get that Superman back, it's worth it. And Wonder Woman says, yes, I agree. And so they try and make Superman, they resurrect Superman, and it turns out badly for them because Superman returns and he is the thing that Batman feared.
Okay, we have that. Was it done? Why did they resurrect Superman? Because Wonder Woman and Batman wanted him because they thought they couldn't save the world without him. Okay, so like, but also Superman has roots for being resurrected for long time ago. It's
comics,
not just the movie. Yeah, this is comic stuff. So I think there's a little more play that we allow because it's so much more original back then when it first happened.
But to go along with that, we also see the reaction of Batman and Superman, or Batman and Wonder Woman being like, yes, we need to do this too. Oh no, we made a mistake. And Superman coming back and not being who he was, and then the explanation for him, his return and understanding, okay, I can still be the Superman that they need me to be.
Why hasn't Wonder Woman learned anything after 1984?
I don't know.
Okay, moving
Anyways.
on. You got that one. The last one we're talking about is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And this one is a little bit, I think it's almost a little bit more delicate. Christians generally see this as a well-done story and a well-done resurrection because it's justifiable. It's an analogy of Jesus Christ resurrecting from the dead. And it's done really well. It's probably one of the best analogies out there as far as that goes.
That's not the word, but...
What's allegory?
Allegory.
I meant allegory. I'm sorry.
Yes. So, the obvious reason of why was Aslan resurrected, this is to show the gospel through storytelling. And that's great, absolutely needed, well done. But there's more to it than just that. And there are moments where it's explained where Aslan is, after the stone table is broken and he returns, he's explaining to Susan and Lucy how the death of the willing sacrifice of an innocent is stronger than the magic of a traitor, of the darkness of a traitor, basically. And so when Edmund becomes a traitor and gives his siblings up to the White Witch for candy, that's him being a traitor, and then he is claimed by the White Witch, or she's not the White Witch, is it? I don't know.
The Winter?
Anyways.
Yeah, I think the Witch.
The Witch, whatever her name is, and so she has a claim to him as a traitor. She has the claim to all the traitors, and so the magic says that she can claim all traitors, and that the traitor can only be redeemed by what was the word that I just used? Innocent, by an innocent coming forward and swapping places with him, basically taking his death upon him.
There it comes again.
But there is more to it than just that, because Aslan, being not only innocent but also perfect, the magic of the stone table is beaten basically by the magic of the old magic, the magic of God, the creation of the world from the beginning to the end. All this stuff tying together and meaning that Aslan, who is God, is able to sacrifice himself for the redemption of
the lost
in order to keep them from losing themselves and losing their life and everything.
Yeah.
And
it's really well.
So it very much is the biblical story, but it's also more than that in some ways, and
it's explained.
I don't want to say it as it's more than the Bible, it's better than the Bible, because it's not. It's completely different than the Bible, but it's also telling it's kind of that same story.
So the reasoning for the resurrection is explained in World, and as through the examples we've mentioned, those that do have a valid explanation that are more than just I want it, have tended to rank higher in our estimation of the resurrection trope. So I think that's part of why The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is ranked higher, along with us really appreciating the allegorical representation in the book, because we like to see the gospel shown through storytelling, and that's one of the better allegories that we've ever read. It's just renowned.
What else is on our list?
Death can't claim the innocent, which you kind of said, but it was very long.
Yeah.
I
don't think so. I don't.
Well, the reason this is coming to mind is it says the Bible says the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. So if the wages of sin is death, but Aslan was perfect, just like Jesus, and he died, then he isn't condemned to death. Aslan took the place of the traitor, and Jesus took our sins upon him so that he could die for us. But he's not condemned by death because both of them were perfect.
Yeah,
so.
And being perfect, death has no hold on them.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, what it is. And so that's why they can rise again.
Well, we hope this was an interesting discussion on resurrection tropes. It was kind of just a different angle to look at this, and discussing how it's done well, how it's not. I mean, we could talk about Frankenstein, which I would argue isn't a resurrection trope. We could talk about Dracula, which he hasn't read yet. We were also
Frankenstein or Dracula.
Yeah, we were also trying to stick to stories that we both were familiar with for the most part.
Other than The Crow, I haven't read The Crow or watched it.
Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that. There's far more that we could go into, far more in-depth conversations to be had about the resurrection trope and all tropes in general. But we had some thoughts on it, and we're like, all right, we need to film this before we just lose it all. So that's what we did, and hopefully it at least made a little bit of sense.
Let us know your thoughts on these topics and what other stories you've seen, good resurrection tropes or bad resurrection tropes. We'd love to chat with you guys more about this.
Yes, thank you guys for watching Erudite Adventure. We post videos every Monday and Thursday, and have our social medias linked in the description down below. Thanks for watching. Stay well.